Kennedy arrived in Berlin, and over the course of the day, he gave 3 speeches towards 35 miles in a motorcade, riding in an open vehicle, sitting between West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer and West Berlin Mayor Willy Brandt, which must have sent some easy messages to the East, who looked upon these guys as really saber rattlers. After his initial remarks at the Tegel Airport and a speech to the Trade Union Congress, the president's entourage proceeded by motorcade, touring West Berlin, stopping at several locations, including the Brandenburger Gate and Checkpoint Charlie, to view the wall and to look into East Berlin. Dense crowds of Berliners lined the streets, waving and cheering for the American president as the motorcade passed. About 12:50, he arrived at the Rudolf-Wilde-Platz and walked in there, spoke with Willy Brandt, had some lunch, and then went to the podium that was set up on the steps of the City Hall, the Schöneberger Rathaus. Now, standing in front of him was a crowd estimated to be more than 300,000 people, calling out greetings and words of welcome. JFK proceeded to give what is identified as one of the great presidential speeches, his famous Ich bin ein Berliner address, a brief, less than 10-minute talk that resonated throughout divided Germany and Europe. The Berliners were ecstatic and showed their favor to what the newspapermen described as thunderous cheers and loud chants of Kennedy, Kennedy. The Berliners are famous for that. Queen Elizabeth showed up in Berlin, and she's there with her person, and people started going, Elizabeth, Elizabeth. It just really drew all the butt. But JFK was fortunately, he really appreciated it for what it was meant. Now, the speech was meant not only for his listeners, but for residents of West Berlin who crowded into the square. It was addressed, as the president stated at a luncheon, to the German people on both sides of the wall, and to the cause of freedom on both sides of the wall. The president's message reached the citizens of East Berlin and the German Democratic Republic through Western radio and television broadcasts, long picked up on the far side of the wall dividing the 2 states. A filtered and truncated version was offered in the East German media. And as it turns out, officials in the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, and the Stasi, the East German Secret Police and Intelligence Gathering Service, had long known the details of the president's visit to Germany, his plans to spend a day in the divided city, even the schedule and location of his individual speeches. Not surprisingly, the trip was a matter of grave concern for East German leadership, which had for several years pressed Khrushchev to back tougher measures against the Western powers to gain international recognition of the sovereignty of their territory and thereby to control the access to West Berlin. What I'm doing here is I'm examining JFK's visit to Berlin and the East German response. How did the intelligence gathering service, the Stasi, and the political leaders of the German Democratic Republic perceive and plan for the visit? What did they know of its details? What preparations did they make? How was the visit covered in the East German media, the press, radio, and television? And finally, what was the reaction of the East German people to the visit? Already by mid-May, more than a month before the announcement of the trip, the GDR, East German leaders, knew the itinerary of the president's visit to Berlin. The Stasi followed the planning for JFK's trip closely, tapping sources in the West, identified in the records only as a reliable source, no name identified, tapping sources in the West for information in the sense of West German objectives. In late May, a Stasi officer prepared a report on comments of leading West German CDU and Senate figures on Kennedy's June 26, 1963 visit. The Stasi had learned that the West German leaders saw the trip as a major public relations event, an opportunity for Kennedy, through, as the Stasi report put it, through strong contact with the West German population, through an extensive tour of the city and a planned massive rally at the Schöneberger Rathaus, to be convinced that the desire for freedom of the population is unbroken. The American president, Stasi continued, should gain a strong impression of the consequences of the divided Berlin, especially from his tour of the western sectors of the city. Kennedy should become convinced that the political situation of West Berlin can only be maintained through a strengthening of the so-called contacts with the Federal Republic, thereby bolstering the position of what the East Germans called the revanchists and the ultras. Those political leaders in West Germany who were viewed as a serious threat to peace because of the repeated calls for German unity under their direction and their urging of NATO and the United States to position nuclear weapons on West German territory. Possibilities that absolutely terrified East German leaders. Now, the Stasi knew the details of JFK's visit, such as the time, location of the president's speeches, and the plans for a rally at the site of the Reichstag, the former parliament, had been rejected. Other issues were under discussion, they knew, including having West German Chancellor, the embodiment of this anti-East German position, accompany Kennedy while the American president was in Berlin. Sources revealed to Stasi agents, however, that the U.S. did not want Adenauer present and attempted to dissuade him from coming from Bonn to Berlin to accompany the American president. Because Adenauer, the Stasi concluded, was tied too closely with the drive for a unified Germany, an issue that the major powers wanted to avoid calling attention to during the president's visit. In addition, but Adenauer, the Stasi official noted, had insisted that this is his last wish before leaving office, and the U.S. relented. However, Kennedy remained firm and insisted that the exact wording of Adenauer's brief speech in Berlin be presented to him well in advance. JFK did not want any surprises. Now, in their analysis of West German activities preceding JFK's visit, the Stasi also detected what they identified some opposition to Kennedy from leading Bonn and West Berlin politicians, in spite of their warm official welcome. This came from, the Stasi concluded, the ultras, those who wanted JFK to recognize the demands and who felt they could pressure him once he saw in person the divided Berlin. This is an issue they come back to again and again and again. The revanchists and the ultras, those in West Berlin who wanted a militarized and powerful West Germany. Now, during mid-June, shortly before the trip, the Stasi received additional information from other reliable sources and more details of the president's scheduled visit to Berlin. They learned, for example, that the route had been changed, but the stops at the wall would remain part of the motorcades toward the city. That following several hours of drive to the city and some speeches, the Stasi reported that JFK would arrive at the Berlin City Hall and deliver what it termed the most important political statement of his visit to West Germany and West Berlin. On the steps of the courthouse, the Stasi expected him to renew the guarantees of freedom for West Berlin, but the Stasi concluded it would not be a biting speech. Stasi also noted that a visit by the president to what they call democratic Berlin, the eastern sector, was deemed not advisable. Now, shortly after the Stasi learned the details of JFK's visit, its staff prepared memoranda and reports that went to the political elite, the Central Committee of the Socialist Unity Party, the SED, the ruling Communist Party in Germany, and the Politburo. Now, the first discussion among East German political leaders, those who would make the decision about what measures were to be taken, came already on May the 20th. A memo entitled Argumentation on Kennedy's Visit to West Berlin and West Germany summed up the position of the GDR's top leadership, which viewed with alarm the travel plans of the U.S. president. Alarm because his presence was seen as playing in the hands of the West German ultras and revanchists. The very first sentence of this 3-page memo sets the tone, and it went, "The Kennedy visit is a dangerous concession made to the Bonn and West German ultras and agitators in the U.S. in the already heightened international tensions. The trip works against reduction of tensions in Europe and creates new tensions." Like that. The issues and concerns of the memorandum sets forth were addressed in a number of high governmental meetings over the next several weeks as the Politburo met to decide what is to be done and who's to do it. Now, as the East German leadership saw the trip, Kennedy had played, as he put it, played into the hands of West German and West Berlin revanchists and their American allies. He did this by not recognizing as a basis of discussion the existence of what they termed two sovereign German states, or acceding to the 7-point plan proposed by the GDR for normalizing relations. The